2024 Democratic nominee in Texas, Collin Allred, has just announced that he is dropping out of the Senate race just before the filing deadline for Texas in 2026. That same day, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett announced that she would also be seeking the Democratic nomination, contesting it with Texas State House Representative James Talarico. Now, why would Jasmine Crockett jump in at the last second of the filing deadline? Well, as you may know, at the request of President Donald Trump, Texas has redrawn their congressional maps to favor Republicans and are aiming to remove 5 Democratic seats. Crockett's district here, the 32nd district, was horribly gerrymandered, taken out of the urban area of Dallas and taken hundreds of miles east, almost all the way to Louisiana. And one thing was clear: Jasmine Crockett would not win if she ran again in this district that went to Donald Trump by nearly 18 points. For the longest time, well, not really that long of a time, but this was a primary between the nominee in 2024, Collin Allred, who overperformed in 2024. He only lost by 8.5 points in a state that Donald Trump won by 13.7. That is a 5.2 point overperformance, so nonetheless a strong candidate. On the other hand, James Talarico here is more focused on a lot of grassroots fundraising and individual change movements, quite similar to what we saw happen in New York City just a few weeks ago, where Zohran Mamdani was so extremely focused on affordability it propelled him to winning the primary and the general election. Now, I don't mean to compare Zohran Mamdani to James Talarico. It's a very different situation, but I do think a lot of other national Democrats in different states have been latching on to this idea of young, out-of-nowhere candidates with a grassroots affordability message that could be quite effective in the 2026 midterm elections against Donald Trump Republicans. When made a video about that, Donald Trump is at a 36% approval rating. If we want to take a look at polling here, just based on electability, Talarico is the candidate the Democrats want to have. Jasmine Crockett is widely seen as a firebrand, anti-MAGA liberal Democrat who's been facing personal attacks from the president, where Trump said that she was, quote, a low IQ person, which is also grammatically incorrect. And while that may be appealing to many Democrats in the state of Texas, I'm just not sure if it will be in a general election environment where she would have to get at least 50% of the vote in a Trump plus 14 state. If we want to take a look at polling here, Jasmine Crockett, just based off the most recent polls for all these matchups, she's down 8 against John Cornyn, down 8 against Ken Paxton, down 5 against Wesley Hunt. That gives us an average of Jasmine Crockett 7 points behind a Republican nominee. Looking at James Talarico, he's down 6 against John Cornyn. He's actually tied with Ken Paxton, and he's down 6 against Wesley Hunt. So that gives us an average of James Talarico behind 4 points and a Republican candidate. And that makes James Talarico more electable by 3 points against Jasmine Crockett, just based off this extremely rough calculation here. Now, I don't mean to say that Jasmine Crockett would do exactly 3 points worse, but it does show that early polling that we have in this does suggest James Talarico to be a stronger general election candidate. Over on the Republican side, we have incumbent Senator John Cornyn that is in the seat right now. We have Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton and Texas Congressman Wesley Hunt. Ken Paxton has been notably seen as the weakest possible candidate for Republicans. He is a MAGA Trump firebrand. And John Cornyn, probably the most electable candidate in Texas, and has been consistently leading in general elections over other Democratic candidates more than Ken Paxton has. But according to DDHQ's polling average, Ken Paxton has always and is still in the lead against John Cornyn here, if we include Wesley Hunt in the most recent poll by McLaughlin and Associates. Although they're not the most reliable, has Ken Paxton up 5, but other pollsters still do have him up a marginal amount, although this is still very much a toss-up primary. Keep in mind that Texas does use a runoff system if no candidate gets over 50% of the vote, so this is looking likely to be a runoff between Ken Paxton and John Cornyn. If we do the same thing we did for Jasmine Crockett and James Talarico, Ken Paxton is ahead by 4 against the average Democratic candidate, and John Cornyn is ahead by 7 against an average Democratic candidate, making John Cornyn 3 points more electable, quote-unquote, over Ken Paxton. So the worst possible outcome for Democrats here is John Cornyn versus Jasmine Crockett. The best possible outcome is Ken Paxton versus James Talarico here. My personal thoughts? I think that James Talarico is the most viable candidate for Democrats, and if they want to win in Texas, then he has to win the primary. I think that Jasmine Crockett appeals to a lot of the left, but maybe not so much the center and the right, especially not the right. All right. Thank you for watching. If you want more updates, please consider subscribing. Goodbye.